Jack is calling from the United States of America. Pronouns are he, him. And once I talk about, I'm confused on this, but standard to convince. Hey, Jack, you're on with Matt and Austin.
Hey, guys. Can you hear me?
Yep. Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, sorry. I can understand why the font to be a little confusing. Kind of because I'm a little confused, which is why I'm calling.
No worries.
I know you said previously that that you don't want to bring in any animosity from other stuff, and I just want to preempt to gird your loins a little bit because this kind of thing I know can get people riled up because it's kind of tough to talk about. But I'll just start with one premise you can say if you accept or deny this. Basically,
okay.
Do you believe that there are abstract concepts that sort of govern the world that exist outside of our mind?
Sure. I don't,
abstract concepts.
Like, what do you, yeah.
Govern.
What do you mean specifically by that?
You understand that, the basis by which we derive truth that isn't through a sense data is by scientific method. Scientific method is based on first principles. So if the scientific method and everything that we kind of know about the world,
all of that is still conditioned on the sense data. We can do our best to verify our sense data by relying on others, but that's also more sense data coming in. So
okay.
I don't know what you mean by an abstract concept. I don't know what you mean by an abstract concept that governs. I'm fine with the fact that there are abstract concepts. I don't think they exist as things unto themselves. They're
kind of
concepts. Concepts are brain states.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm also okay with accepting the premise that there could be abstract concepts that are at play in the physical universe that we have not yet observed because they exist in some sort of dimensional reality that we are not capable of observing with our physical senses and with the instruments that we've built up to this point with the technology. I'm okay with that, but I also am hesitant to go, these abstract to say the premise is these abstract concepts are the governors of the universe. I could say they are at play in the physical universe, but I'm not saying they definitely are. I'm saying I'm okay with the concept that they could be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So basically, so if these sort of concepts, abstract concepts, they exist in the mind, I'm guessing you would say that they are sort of invented, not consciously necessarily, but we apply these things to the world, even though they may or may not actually are actually at play or govern it. Would you say that?
I'm trying to get it. I'm not quite sure what you're asking or getting at.
So basically, how do I even? Do you believe that? Well, do you believe that the world, the material, is governed or sort of said about it acts based on immaterial things, concepts?
Are you asking us?
Gravity isn't a concept, or
gravity's not a concept. Gravity's the label we put on an actual physical force.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Gravity isn't a good example. I'm sorry. I've had a tough day.
Are you just talking about just invisible things that are invisible to the naked eye that are acting on the physical universe?
No, I'm sorry. No. So from the very beginning, we sort of determine how the physical world works through science. Science is based on math. Math is based on philosophy, first principles of philosophy. Those aren't grounded in anything material. So do you believe that they exist outside of our mind?
One more time, do I believe what exists outside of our mind?
The things on which math and science are dependent.
Math and science are dependent on physical facts about reality.
But the math and science, so you have two things. So without math, those are just kind of things. There are no, the concept of two doesn't really exist outside of our mind. Yeah.
So you're talking about
no concept exists outside of mind.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that's I figured you would say something like that. I'm just trying to get a further understanding of sort of the way you go about this. So if a concept doesn't exist outside of the mind, are you convinced? So wait, if a concept doesn't exist outside of the mind, how are you convinced that these concepts by which we determine scientific truth actually apply to the real world?
Depending on which concepts you're talking about, most of them are descriptive of either things that are conditioned on identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle, the foundations of logic, which we can't demonstrate are universally true, but we assume are universally true as a necessity, because you would have to assume they're true to try to show that they're false. But like that is those three are the foundations of logic, and mathematics is derived from that, and it describes, as most abstract concepts do, they describe things about reality.
So like if they're descriptive, so you're saying that like they're tools by which we, determine things about reality. Does that mean like the descriptions may or may not be incorrect? So like what kind of convinces you that these are correct descriptions? You say out of like necessity, so you can like
demonstration, observation. Yeah.
It is a practical necessity that I accept the foundations of logic until such time as someone can demonstrate that they aren't true, because they have been demonstrated to work. We just haven't demonstrated that they will always work, because we can't have that exhaustive knowledge. And so as soon as someone demonstrates that there are circumstances under which they wouldn't work, then I would toss them out. But it appears by their own, I'm not going to get the right word. It suggests that they are in fact inviolate, that identity and non-contradiction are always the case. They couldn't be anything, but those aren't like speed limit signs. They're not prescriptive laws, they are descriptive. And if everything else ceased to exist, if there was no reality anywhere, if we were just in nothingness, the concepts of identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle would still be true, except there would be no one to recognize them and nothing for them to describe. It would still be the case, because if we got rid of everything and we're left with absolutely nothing, then nothing is nothing. Everything is nothing or not nothing, and nothing is everything and nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I figured. But again, sorry. The when you say they're descriptive, like you say it's descriptive because it works based on like your sensitivity, the way your mind works. So
they're descriptive. They're descriptive.
You kind of
in the same
accept it because
are you familiar with Are you familiar with like a Venn diagram?
Yeah, of course.
Cool. So a Venn diagram with a single circle, that is the simplest possible Venn diagram, and it is 100% a demonstration of the foundations of logic that we're talking about. Because if you label everything that's inside of the circle as A, then everything that is in the circle is A, everything that is not in the circle is not A, and everything is either in the circle or out of the circle. That seems to be completely true in every conceivable circumstance. I can't even conceive of a circumstance where it wouldn't be. And if everything went away to where there were no more minds to conceive, the truth of that single diagram seemingly would still be true, even though there's nobody to see it and nothing for it to actually, no content to put in the A.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. So, I mean, again, so it's kind of like exists in our mind. So, like, goddamn. So, I should have studied philosophy instead of this, so I could come on a talk show and do it correctly. But when you say that this is sort of so again, like, I guess kind of the issue I'm getting at, or that I would get at if I could properly communicate today, would be when we in any sort of conversation about God, when we attempt to reason towards God, it always kind of seems like it's kind of a tough thing to get, and nobody ever seems to do it correctly, atheists or whatever, because generally the claim is, at least among Abrahamic faiths, similar stuff, is that God kind of is the precondition for those concepts which govern the world, that they're not descriptive, they're prescriptive. So
No,
no,
there's nothing about the Abrahamic faith that declare or claim that God is the foundation of logic. That is a modern precept thing, because they're like, there are problems in philosophy that haven't been solved and maybe impossible to solve. And so God believers tend to inject their God into that gap. Abrahamic, and even if Abrahamic faiths described their God as, hey, this is the foundation of logic, that also would not make it true. Because if there's no possibility, if it is the case that what we talk about in that Venn diagram is always true under all circumstances, then it needs no foundation. There is no foundation for it, and there wouldn't need to be. It's as if people want to claim God as a foundation for logic, as if God could change logic, which is in violation of logic. I mean, most modern apologists accept that God can't violate logical law. Can God do something?
Yeah,
Can God make a married bachelor? Can God make a square circle?
no. So
Okay.
again, so I mean, I kind of disagree with you on the premise that Abrahamic faiths in general do not describe God as the sort of like
Where
foundation for logic. I guess you could say that.
does the
Like
Bible say it?
like well, just again, I'm a Catholic. I don't believe that the Bible is like um
I'm sorry.
like
Do
the Quran or whatever.
Catholic books?
I believe in
Do
natural
Catholic
theology.
books?
Like, yeah, I'm Catholic. Yeah,
What Catholic book claims that God is the foundation of logic?
I'm a theologica.
And why? And why should we consider that instructive?
Well, I mean, based on the reasoning within it, again, I'm not like a Thomas Aquinas scholar, or I don't know a lot about Saint Maximus the Confessor or whatever. But like, again, I like the issue is like you say, there's no foundation, but you accept it because it works. But just because something works doesn't mean it's true. So I'm kind of confused
It
on
actually
what
does.
kind of make.
It just doesn't mean it's always going to be true. If I pick up a pen
Yeah.
and somebody says, "Does this pen write?" and I scribble with it and it writes, then my answer is yes. That doesn't mean it's always going to write. But if there's an item that we picked up and used and it has worked every single time and there is no defeater for it continuing to work, and there's an item that works in every possible circumstance, why on earth are you looking for a grounding for the thing that just is? I guess the question is,
Because
if X is true, how do you show that X can only be true if there is some divine foundation rather than X merely is true?
you determine, well, it's kind of you determine like, okay, like what are the potential possibilities? So like you're saying that they just kind of are. I find issue with this because you're saying something is a claim that something is. It's dependent on those first principles, like
No, I'm sorry.
whatever.
Hang on. Check.
Sorry. Yeah.
I'm saying if there is an X, any X, that is in fact true, how do you show that X isn't merely prima facie true and could not be otherwise, as opposed to X needs some grounding or foundation?
Well, I think it kind of gets to the issue. I'm not sure that you can. Like when I was looking at,
then why try?
and then the reason I called in, like I want to be able to put all this out so that like we don't get sidetracked. I'm sorry if like this kind of I have no intention on like wasting your time, but when I was looking at sort of the debates with atheism and stuff recently, I encountered tags, and it's kind of like a brain worm. It seems to me that I've seen atheists say that like they don't attest spiritual experiences or any supernatural events because they're sense that it could be incorrect and doesn't really align with anything scientific. But then at the same time, when they're encountered with tag, they state that like, well, these sort of things do not require any sort of justification because they have worked in all circumstances which we have encountered. But that sort of thing in and of itself is sort of like a value statement. Like, what is it because it has? Like, why should I accept it?
You've already inverted what I said in order to shift the burden of proof. it is not the case that these things don't. It is not the case that I'm saying these things don't require justification. I'm saying theists claim they require justification, and therefore theists have a burden of proof to show that they do in fact require justification. And even once they've done that, if it is the case, that doesn't mean that their justification that they're proposing now is correct. So it's not just a matter of putting the cart before the horse. It's a matter of just claiming you have a cart and putting that before the horse.
Yeah. So, like, what is this is kind of like what I'm getting at. It's hard to communicate it. What is the sort of counter to the counter to the idea that it requires justification? Like, why
the counter?
Are you sort of like, I don't know if it does or not?
Yes. The counter to someone saying it requires justification is to say, what is your argument to show that it requires justification? Until you show that it requires justification, I have no reason to think it requires justification.
Well, if it has so again, like these bases of logic, if they don't require justification, under what circumstances would anything else require justification, even if they're metaphysically dependent on those things?
Now we're equivocating on justification. I'm sorry. We should use two different words. I think that the laws of logic are in fact justified by their continued use and continued demonstration of reliability. That is separate from whether they require a grounding. And so if theists are going to claim that there needs to be a grounding for logic, where's the demonstration for that?
Well, the sort of demonstration would also, I appreciate that we're sort of parsing out terms. The sort of demonstration would be like would be again another shift in not justification, grounding or whatever. Okay, so why do just these things need to be grounded? So like,
I'm not convinced that anything needs to be grounded. We find things
that's not the claim that Matt's making.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Matt. Sorry. Yeah.
No, it's fine. Also,
he's asking you to justify the claim that you're making.
Yeah. But also earlier,
so kind of like,
I don't want to derail. I just want to make sure that Austin also hears this, because we may need to dig in on it, which is, you mentioned spiritual experiences, and I don't even know what the hell that is or what it means. So we may come back to that. But if I'm saying that I don't see a reason why logic requires a grounding, can you name something that requires a grounding that I already accept has a grounding?
I would get, like, was it like cause and effect? Like this, like something is caused by something else. Like, I don't know.
That's a great
the political instability in the United States caused by Donald Trump. I don't know.
Well,
like I feel like it should be grounded.
You kind of went off the rails there, because when you talk about
I tried to pick something that I figured you would need grounding for.
No. So we're talking about grounding of abstract things, not concrete things. Okay. Whether or not the current state of the United States is caused by Donald Trump is a concrete thing. It is synthetic and not analytic. You're talking about analytic things. And so, but causality and models of causality are certainly abstract concepts that are trying to describe how things work in the universe. And what is the grounding for assertions about causality, that cause precedes effect? And the only grounding, it isn't grounded in the sense that you're hoping perhaps to ground logic. Our description of cause and effect is entirely about observation. And as it turns out, there are people starting to make a case that because space-time isn't necessarily how we understand it, that there may be circumstances under which effect precedes cause. I don't buy it because I don't understand it. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying I don't grok that. But if you're saying, oh, Matt, you accept the basics of cause and effect without having a grounding, I would say that I definitely am similarly accept that without having a grounding, but I only accept it, like everything else, tentatively based on its justification, the demonstration that this keeps happening, like as long as I'm writing with the pen.
Okay, I get that. Sorry, I'm cause and effect. I should. Yeah.
I think
Jack,
I think Austin wants to get in here because he might take this in a different direction, because I think we're kind of digging in on low-level stuff without really having.
Well,
Anyway, go ahead.
I've been listening for 5.5 minutes about, correct me if I'm wrong. It seems like from the beginning you were trying to lay out a sort of rhetorical trap where you were going to try to establish that nothing can exist outside of our conception of it inside of our mind. Math, anything that we agree is real, the laws of the universe. And then you were going to say, okay, so if the concept of a creator exists inside of the human mind and it's the story that's told, how is that any different? And from the from the word,
I mean, I can say what I was trying. I can say what I was trying to get at.
That's what I would actually like. I would love for you to get to your point.
Okay, so the reason I even opened up with the fact that that I didn't want to irritate anybody is because I'm trying to figure out if you're something, and if I say that you are this thing, it's irritating, and I don't want to do that because it's incredibly uncharitable. Based on
what's the thing you're trying to figure out if we are or not?
Yeah. So I don't want to accuse you, and I want to see myself.
Let's just be direct with our language. What are you trying to determine about us?
I was trying to figure out if you're solipsist. It seems like to me that the standard of a lot of evidence for atheists, at least for God, is the standard of solipsism, right? So basically, the only way to demonstrate to a solipsist that God exists is for them to be God. And it's with all of these sort of debates that I've seen, it seems pointing in this direction. I didn't want to open with that because it's incredibly rude and it gets nowhere.
Yeah, but also, if you had just said, "Hey, are you a solipsist?" my answer would be pretty straightforward. I'm aware of no solution to the problem of hard solipsism, but solipsism, as you describe it, which is the only way to convince an atheist that there's a God, is that if the atheist was a God, that doesn't describe my position or even a position I recognize as solipsism.
Yeah, that's why I was trying to understand your position through questioning instead of anyway.
Yeah, but that's not what this show is.
Well, I mean, it's what's kind of weird is that we kind of need to understand, because
the title of the show isn't, hey, call in and ask us what our conception of the universe is. The title of the show is call in and convince us why your theistic worldview is something we should adopt. So that's why I'm can we get to the point of your call, please, Jack? Because you called in and said, I really don't want to irritate you, but this is irritating to me personally. It's irritating to
what I'm trying to understand is how exactly do you expect me to convince you of God if I think you're a solipsist, right?
That's not our problem.
I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit what you think I am.
Well,
tell me
why.
It
makes the entire show irrelevant. Why would you?
It doesn't.
Again,
no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't make the show irrelevant.
If you were a solipsist, it'll make the show irrelevant.
Listen to me. It doesn't make the show irrelevant. It makes your claims useless and undefendable. That doesn't make the show irrelevant.
It makes everybody's claims useless and undefendable.
Oh my God! Shut up.
So this is what's annoying.
The show is to get people to defend what they believe and either change our minds or expose that they are advocating for things that are in fact unreasonable. That the fact that you are advocating for an untestable, unfalsifiable position, and you want to claim that if we're going to accept that there's no solution to problem of hard solipsism, that all of a sudden this means we must be God to be demonstrate. What I've already answered the question over and over again about what it would take to convince me that there's a God, and never has my answer been I would need to be God. I'm sorry that you believe shit that you cannot reasonably justify, but that doesn't make our show useless. You're demonstrating the point of the show.
Okay. So I know that people don't say, people 90% of the time when there's I'm going to lower my voice. When 90% of the time when somebody's using solipsism, they don't say the only way to convince me if something exists is that if I was that thing. They say things like my sense that is inaccurate and abstract concepts may or may not apply to the real world. This leads to solipsism, right? And that's kind of what I was getting from seeing things that I've seen before, right? You understand?
Can we get to your argument, Jack? Can we get to what your argument is? I want to hear your justification. That's what I'm interested in. When people call into the show, I want to hear why you believe in an intelligent creator and why you think we should adopt that belief. I would love if we could get to your position.
the position. Okay, my position on the existence of God is that yes, I believe that God is like the necessary contingent for, first principles, all that kind of stuff. You probably already know what that is. The issue is, again, like when I called onto the show, it's like you said you see if I had anything to convince you. Again, that's our concepts about the real world, like necessarily, and I said it might be inaccurate. Then like, what's the point of the talk? I mean, like, of course, understanding what I think and deconstructing that. But again, like, if
That's
you
the
deconstruct
whole
me, you're just going to
purpose of
get
the
to the point
fucking
where
show.
Yeah, but again,
Okay, so
like,
No.
okay,
So stop talking. You're calling in because you have a goal of demonstrating that we have unreasonable standards for
so
what
I'll try
should
to find out.
convince
I
us
don't
that
know
a
if you
God.
do. Like, I don't want to.
that's what you're
Never
trying to do,
mind.
though. He's right. So what you wanted to do today is call in and spend 6 minutes trying to demonstrate that we are solipsists who believe that there is nothing outside in the universe verifiable outside of our own consciousness and outside of ourselves, and because of that, it's impossible to convince us of anything, and there's the whole point of the show is pointless. That was why you wanted to call in and do that. What all Matt ever said about solipsism is he doesn't have an answer or a solution for hard solipsism. Neither do I. Like, and so if your contention is with solipsism as a philosophy, feel free to explain to us how you're going to disprove the proposition that there is nothing that exists outside of the self. Firmly and demonstrably. It's not a position that I actually walk through the world operating with. I'm not walking through the world going, no one
Nobody
exists
does.
but me. Nobody actually does. But what Matt's saying is there's also no way to actually definitively verify that there is actual tangible reality outside of this one's own consciousness. Unless you believe, Jack, that you can definitively solve that and prove that, which, hey, let's have that conversation. Do you have evidence to demonstrate the fallaciousness and invalidity of hard solipsism?
Well, in terms of like hard solipsism, I figure that like we're experiencing. I mean, this is a bit separate, but that we're experiencing. So we're not experiencing ourselves. We're experiencing. That means there's something outside of the real world. That doesn't mean you can make any descriptive statements about it. The thing is, like, of course, I wanted to see if you guys were solipsists, and then we could get into something about like the transcendental argument and stuff like that. Because
that doesn't solve the problem of hard solipsism. Just to say we're experiencing, you have to show that what you're experiencing is actually reality and not a projection of your mind.
Okay. I thought you meant. Sorry, my apologies.
Yeah, literally solipsism. I'm going with literally what solipsism is, rather than your inferred conclusion from your flawed understanding of solipsism. We're asking you, how do you resolve solipsism?
The thing is, I don't. There is no counter to solipsism. The reason that I agree.
Which means you now are just as much of a solipsist as we are, which makes all of this irrelevant.
No, so again, that's what I was trying to find out, if you were solipsist. Like,
I'm going to mute you, Jack, because now you've reached the point where you've completely pissed me off. This is not the call in and quiz the fucking hosts on philosophy show. This is to defend the fuck what you believe, which means you've now wasted a half hour of everybody's time. Now you're unmuted.
We're just as much of solipsists as you are. You were trying to find that out. That's your answer. We are every bit as much solipsists as you are, which is to say, it's not something that we walk through the world operating with as our primary worldview, but it's something that we don't have an actual solution for the question of whether or not there is actual verifiable reality outside of one's own consciousness and experience of it. We don't have an answer for it. Neither do you. Why is this the framework with which you want to operate on? How is this going to be the framework that you're going to convince us to accept the proposition of an intelligent creator? Can we please get to your argument now, please?
I mean, not again. Based on the fact that we both have we understand our views on solipsism here. Based on that, is not everything that we believe the same amount of leap of faith as everything else? In which case, the atheist, like, I guess not even worldview, like the atheist point, lack of belief in God is just as acceptable as the belief in God.
No.
No.
Because you and I believe in pretty much all of the same facts about reality, and yet you add to those things that I don't add. So you don't get to do this thing of, oh, my belief in God is just as unjustified as your belief in reality. No, it's fucking not. You believe in reality too, but you believe that you have an explanation for reality. And I don't believe you have an explanation for reality. So we're not on the same fucking footing.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course, not the same footing as that. That's anyway. But yeah, like, and you say that me adding stuff, if I am even adding stuff, like,
do you believe in a God?
Like
do you believe in a God?
Again, like, I'll get to this. You say adding
stuff. Do you believe
in
a fucking God, you Catholic avoider of the fucking question?
That's a good one. Yes, I do.
Yes. So you believe in a God.
I also do not believe that complexity.
And I don't. Oh my God. You believe in a God and I don't, correct?
Yes.
Which means we believe in the same world, but you would believe in an additional thing, right?
Yeah, but I subtract one. Can I get to
Why?
that?
No, there's no fucking but. I'm still asking questions. Why did you make me work so hard to get you to answer one fucking question honestly?
You asked if I believe in the existence of God. Say yes, but you're trying to say that I add stuff.
No.
I mean, like, I do add stuff, but we're on the same level.
No.
Yeah, because I subtract as well.
I didn't ask you. Jesus fucking Christ. Go back and rewind, because now you're just fucking lying. I asked you if you believe in a God.
Dude, can I say what I'm subtracting here? Or are you just going to keep saying that I'm lying?
Okay, you're a fucking liar, and I'm going to mute you so that you don't interrupt me while I'm pointing out how you're a fucking liar. You said and suggested that we're on the same footing under this model, and that everything that I believe is as untestable or unfalsifiable or unverifiable as what you believe. And I was pointing out that you believe in a thing that is in addition to what I believe about the world. And then you wouldn't answer the question. So I asked you if you believe in God, because that is the prime example of this. But now we're back to tap dancing. So let's try this again, Jack. Do you have a reason?
Yeah. So I believe in something that
do you have a reason?
I believe in something.
Jesus fucking Christ, I haven't even asked. I will not answer a single fucking question from you for the rest of this show, Jack. You don't get to fucking keep quizzing me. Book a debate. Book a fucking debate if you want to quiz me on my beliefs. I'm going to ask you questions and you're going to answer them, and then we will let you expand on it. Do you have a reason that we should believe in the God that you believe in? Yes or no?
I mean, yes.
Cool. What is it?
The account of God provides, like, we're going to circle back, provides a sort of satisfying, in a manner of speaking, basis for the abstract concepts which descriptive or prescriptive sort of the world operates on. And like the addition of that, while it adds to the complexity, I guess you could say there's more stuff going on. The idea that more stuff is going on is based off of, it's either a presupposition or based off of those principles that, again, like, that I would say God is grounded for. So if I can remove that and add God, like the same number of things. I'm kind of
okay. So yeah, this is exactly what I thought.
Satisfying. Yeah, go ahead. Awesome. Go ahead.
From the beginning, beginning of this call, this is exactly where I thought we were going. That's why I was kind of like, hey, can we just get to it? Because I figured it was this, and that's what it sounded like you were building toward, and it just took us a really, really long time to get there. But that's what when you were asking all the questions about math and like, how do you know that math is what it is? Doesn't math just exist inside your head? And what we said early on was demonstrability and observation, demonstration and observation. And then we got into this whole solipsism question of like, well, even if you're observing things, if everything just exists inside of your soul consciousness, then what does demonstration and observation mean? Well, we're not saying that we are hard solipsists who experience the world through that philosophical viewpoint. We're just saying we don't have a solve for it. But we are saying, like, when it comes to the proposition of intelligent design versus the proposition of gravity and math, there's a difference between the way that the collective of humanity has observed and demonstrated these different truth claims. There's a big difference between the way that these things are experienced and with the way that these things are demonstrated and observed. We demonstrate the veracity of math through its application in real life on a day-to-day basis. We see it happening. They're not just the same. They're not just two philosophical propositions for which there is equal probability and improbability. That one is much, there's just so much more evidential reason to believe in one than the other. The other is just, in your own words, it's just sort of like, it's a satisfying puzzle piece to put into the complexity of the universe. And I disagree with that. I don't think it's a satisfying explanation. I find it to be a childish and kind of intensely simplistic and honestly stupid solution to the complexity of the universe. I think it's absurdly idiotic that so many people accept the fairy tale they were told as kids that a magic man with a beard somewhere did spells and created the universe. Yeah, it is what you believe in, and it's what you have called. Yes, it is, Jack, and it's what you have called a status.
Like, I don't.
What the fuck is God then, Jack? Is God not magic? Are you fucking kidding me? The creator of the universe is not
what
magic.
Is magic?
The creator,
like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, you're pulling out these things that you say to like insult me, because I don't.
Magic is a man who is the omnipotent, all-knowing, all-powerful creator of everything that has ever existed. If that's not a magic space wizard, I don't know what the fuck is, dude. I don't know what we're talking about. So, like, the fact that you're claiming that the God story is a satisfying application to explain the complexity of the universe and the complexities of questions about consciousness when it comes to, can consciousness be verified to actually exist outside of the self, that the God proposition is a satisfying conclusion to it, I wholeheartedly disagree and say it's a moronic solution to the problem. It is a fucking idiotic solution to the problem. It's not satisfying in any, to me at least, not at all. So when you just sort of throw it out there that it's a satisfying solution, I'm like, no, it's a fucking idiotic solution. It's a childish one. And what we're asking you to do on this show is to explain to us why it's not, why it's sophisticated, why we should take it seriously in the slightest.
Well, I mean, if you do, considering that the claim is that God is sort of like the physical, metaphysical dependent of all things, and you reject the idea that anything needs grounding, it's just kind of like, there's no, like, what am I?
Yeah, if we reject
like,
your presupposed premises,
you're like rejecting God outright. Period. Like your belief.
No, we're not, Jack. You liar. We started with this.
I can't read your mind, Billy.
What'd you say?
I can't read your mind, Billy. Sorry, I said Dilly instead of Dillahunty by accident.
I don't need you to read my mind, and I don't need you to speak, especially when I'm calling you out for dishonesty. Okay?
I think, yeah, okay.
What we're talking about here, none of us have asserted that nothing needs a grounding, and yet you just accused us by implications. You said, shut your fucking mouth! You just accused us by implication of holding the position that nothing needs a grounding, which is not a position either of us have advocated for at all. Correct?
Yeah, not explicitly, no.
Yeah. So why would you accuse us? Why would you accuse us of holding a position that neither of us have suggested or defended?
You stated that first principles, you don't say that they don't require grounding. You're not sure if they do. You're not sure if they
Correct.
require grounding. Then you're not sure if anything metaphysically dependent on them also requires a grounding.
Correct.
Right?
It's up to the people who are claiming that a grounding is required to meet their burden of proof, something you haven't done. And when we point out that you haven't done it, instead, you misrepresent our position as a straw man in order to avoid the fact that you have not demonstrated that logic requires a grounding. And when I asked earlier from other people whether they care more about whether their beliefs are true than whether they're comforting, I now know that your answer is comforting because you flatly said that the God answer is satisfying, even though it complicates things. You didn't say the God answer is true. So you are going with a satisfying pacifier to assuage your discomfort with having to say you don't fucking know. And you're misrepresenting our position while all we were doing was asking you to defend yours.
Yeah, when I say satisfying, I don't mean like this, like in this sort of like emotional way, like a cake is satisfying. And satisfying is then it all just kind of like clicks down. I mean, when you say that the logic and therefore, not logic, the first principles and therefore everything dependent on them does require grounding.
For the last fucking time, I've muted you so nobody can hear you. And this way I won't have to yell at you.
We've never said that.
We didn't say they don't require grounding. I'm yelling at you anyway, because I'm sick to death of you fucking misrepresenting us. Are you stupid? How many times can we say that our position is those asserting that a grounding is required must demonstrate it? And as soon as they do, we will accept it. And instead of you actually doing the thing that you think you've done for yourself, you've convinced yourself that a grounding is required, but you can't demonstrate to anybody else, you continue to misrepresent our position. Last chance, Jack. Are you going to retract that and accurately reflect our position?
Yeah.
I'm so sick of you misspeaking over and over. It's really fucking frustrating to be this diligent and answer this many of your pedantic little questions you could have done by looking up an interview with either one of us, or one of the 50 fucking thousand debates that I've done on this subject, or the times that I've debated the transcendental argument and presuppositionalists over and over again, but you didn't. You called in and quizzed us, and we patiently sat here and did it, and now you're misrepresenting us repeatedly. How many more times are you going to misspeak before you acknowledge what we've actually fucking said?
I'll say it, so then not you, do not necessarily believe that it requires a grounding. Okay? Sorry.
Believe what requires a grounding?
When logic first principles. You don't necessarily believe it. Like, may or may not, there's no like, I'm not saying it does.
We are not asserting a truth claim about our worldview requiring some kind of grounding.
I am not convinced. Yes. Continue.
Okay. Sorry. Given that, say that the basis, so I have to provide sort of justification. So if justification based on logic, which does not necessarily require grounding. Okay. Why necessarily does Mike claim that God exists or require grounding when logic itself may or may not necessarily require it?
Great. Because for reason, logic is the grounding. Logic is the foundation for reason. So we acknowledge that as a practical necessity, we must accept identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle are not only demonstrably true in every circumstance that we've investigated and could imagine, but that we can't say they are necessarily universal. This is the issue of the primacy of reason. However, within the context, within the framework of reasoning to that standard is the grounding for reason. It is what we use to say that it is reasonable to conclude that you misrepresented our position. It is reasonable to conclude that you possibly misunderstood something about our position. It is reasonable to conclude that we landed on the moon. It is reasonable to conclude that I'm looking at a camera right now. All of those things are grounded or foundationed upon logic. The fact that logic itself may or may not need a grounding or require grounding is an open question. But all of your claims about God are still within this framework of logic, unless you're asserting that God can violate logic. Are you?
No.
No. So your in-scope claim that there's a God that serves as a grounding for logic is on the same logical footing or framework as every other claim. And all of those claims meet their burden of proof with respect to reasonableness within that framework. And the God claim must do that as well.
Okay. We're gonna go in circles. I should have made like a plan or something so I wouldn't waste your time as much.
Well, I think that the problem was that you came in here with a really specific goal, obviously, right? You wanted to paint us into a corner. You wanted to walk us into a little trap where we could go.
I don't want to paint you into a corner. I wanted to see if
no, you did. That's why, exactly. That's why you had such a hard time letting go of this false representation of our position, because you were already trying to get us to say that that's what our position was. And when we wouldn't do it, you were like, okay, well, you said it. You just kept restating it as though we did say it when we wouldn't let you go. Now you're kind of stuck, because it always just comes back to the fact that you even came back and said, okay, well, if you guys are accepting that there doesn't necessarily need to be a grounding for logic, how come I need to demonstrate the evidence for my grounding for my logic? And the reason is because you're the one making the fucking claim. And that's the whole basis of this entire fucking show, is because you are the one coming to us saying there is a grounding for the way the universe is, for the way that things work. And it is the intelligent creator of the universe. And we are saying, justify that claim. And you're saying, how come I have to justify mine if you guys don't have to justify yours? Because we're not making the fucking claim. That's the whole fucking show. That's the whole show. We're not making the claim. You are. That's why you're here. You are here to tell us why the claim is accurate.
Okay. Guess I misunderstood the nature of the show. So I apologize.
I guess you misunderstood the nature of of atheism in general, of like the lack, like that's the whole thing.
I don't know about that, but
burden of proof is like a massive thing in on shows like this. It's like you are the one making the truth.
Austin.
Yeah.
It's skepticism that he's not representing well. Atheism.
Right.
You can be an atheist for the stupidest fucking reasons ever. And I spend, believe it or not, I spend more of my time these days correcting stupid fucking atheists than I do theists who just have an irrational view of the world.
Fair enough.
Theists do the same thing with theists. Kind of funny.
Yeah. Like,
anyway,
you know what'd be really interesting?
Somebody.
You know what'd be really interesting is, and I'm not suggesting we actually do this, Jack, but I would be interested to have you go through and critique the previous callers from today, trying to defend whatever their beliefs. Not right now. I'm not saying do it. I'm saying that would be something I might find interesting.
Okay. Okay. I mean, you have my number. You can text me about it. But
I'm not looking at your number. I'm not taking your number down.
Yeah.
I think it would be unethical for me to take numbers from the show and then start reaching out phone calls for people.
Yeah.
It's not right.
Well, I mean, it was an interesting conversation. I'm sorry that we kind of, but
it's just that you came in with an agenda to try to catch us doing something that we wouldn't do, and then you kept trying to make us do it. So
again, I don't.
Jack, just stop, because when Austin said you came in,
I'm not going to convince you that I was.
Oh my God! When Austin said you came in trying to paint us in a corner, and you're like, oh no, I came in to see if you'd paint yourself into a corner. Okay, thank you for the distinction without a difference. Neither of which are the purpose of the show, and neither of which is an honest way of having the conversation that we should have had, which is why I called you out for misrepresenting our position. Now you're misrepresenting yours. When Austin's not saying necessarily, ooh, you came in and your whole plan was to get a video clip to use on your channel of where you painted us into a corner and ownzored us. And your answer is, no, I'm not looking for a clip. I just wanted to see if you'd paint yourself into a corner. Okay. We're here to not paint people into corners, but to actually engage, get them to defend their beliefs. And if they can't, that's on them. Like, it's not my fault that the earlier callers didn't defend that. And it's not our fault here that you didn't give us a reason why logic must be grounded, and yet you did not.
I mean, yeah, like a large basis of my theism is a comparison with other positions. So I came on here. It would be a bad sort of way to. It wasn't good in the context of the show. I'm sorry.
It's fine, Jack. We got there. It's all good. Call me back another time if you get something else. But one thing is, instead of comparing your worldview to other worldviews, compare your reasons for accepting your worldview to reasons that are reliable. Because I don't think that faith is a reliable path to truth. And I don't think the fact that you find something satisfying is a reliable path to truth, whether you mean it in an emotional sense or even in an intellectual sense. It shouldn't be satisfying unless it's demonstrably reasonable from my perspective. If there's not a way to demonstrate a claim, then the only position I can have on that claim is I don't have a distinct position because there's not one to demonstrate. I don't know if the concept of, let's say, before the universe even makes any sense. I don't claim that there are no gods. I don't believe there are any. And there are some specific gods that I think definitely don't exist by a logical contradiction or contradiction with observed facts and reality. But the core principle of skepticism is to say, I want to believe as many true things and a few false things as possible. And that means I need the best methods. And until such time as a claim, a proposition is justified by the best methods, which are not me saying I need to be God. By the way, if you haven't heard it before, Jack, here's my answer to what would change your mind about God.
Yeah.
If there is a God, that God should know, presumably, I mean, we're talking within the scope of, gods that know someone's mind, the Omnimax type of God. That God should know exactly what would change my mind. And that God should be capable of doing the thing that would change my mind. And that has not happened, which means either that God doesn't exist or that God doesn't want me to know that it exists yet. Either way, it's not my problem. And it would be monumentally arrogant of me to suggest that I have in any way, any standard of evidence that would allow me to tell the difference between an actual God and something that can just appear to be godlike. And what's funny is, I've not run across either an actual God or anything godlike.
I mean, I'm not going to respond to that. That's kind of like, I feel like it'd be inappropriate at the time, but
it's all right.
I mean, yeah. So, sorry, yeah.
Got to move on to some other callers, but Jack, I'll talk to you later.
Have a good one.
Hey there, everyone. We want you to check out our live shows. 6 days a week, 6 shows a week, 5 days a week, 6 shows. And also there are other channels coming. And this part is meaningless, but you could support this channel by watching the live shows, by checking out another episode. Tell the algorithm you want to stay here. You're not going to go off to some video of some super rich guy committing war crimes. You're going to stick around here and maybe you'll leave a comment, or what else could they do, Eve?
They could head over to patreon.com/calltheline, right? Am I looking?
That's another thing. And they can
right and
they could subscribe. No, you got it right. I got it wrong the first time.
And they could also comment. Yeah.